The sleek black ship descended through the crimson atmosphere of Kepler 442b like a blade cutting through silk. Inside the vessel, three Vorthak hunters checked their weapons one final time. Their species had evolved over millions of years to become the galaxy's most feared predators. Standing 8 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws and skin that could change color like a chameleon, they were built for one purpose: the hunt. Commander Thax flexed his 4 arms, each ending in claws that could slice through steel. His yellow eyes glowed in the dim light of the ship's interior. Remember, this human female has survived longer than any prey we've tracked. 3 solar cycles she's been on this planet. The betting pools back home say she won't last another day. His second-in-command, Krell, hissed with amusement. Humans are soft creatures. No natural weapons, no armor, weak senses. She probably survived by hiding in caves and eating insects. He activated his plasma rifle, watching the energy coils glow bright blue. This will be disappointing. The third hunter, young Zek on his first sanctioned hunt, remained silent. He had studied the humans' file extensively. Sarah Chun, former Earth Defense Force pilot, had crash-landed on this hostile world after her ship was attacked by pirates. What puzzled him was how she had survived so long. Kepler 442b was home to creatures that made Earth's most dangerous predators look like house pets. The atmosphere was barely breathable for humans, the gravity was 1.3 times Earth normal, and the temperature fluctuated between freezing and scorching within hours. Movement detected, Thax announced, studying his scanner. 2 clicks north, heading toward the canyon system. He grinned, revealing rows of serrated teeth. She's making this easy. Those canyons are dead end. The ship landed silently in a clearing surrounded by twisted purple trees that seemed to writhe in the toxic wind. The hunters emerged, their adaptive camouflage immediately matching the alien landscape. They moved with practiced precision, millions of years of evolutionary perfection in every step. Krell sniffed the air through the filtration slits in his face. I smell fear pheromones. She knows we're here. He laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Good. Prey always tastes better when it's terrified. They followed the trail through dense fungal forests where bioluminescent spores floated like deadly snowflakes. Any one of those spores could paralyze a human within seconds, yet somehow their quarry had passed through unharmed. Zek noticed something else. The local predators were avoiding this area. Fresh tracks of razor-backed hexapods suddenly veered away from the human's path. Why would apex predators avoid such easy prey? The canyon loomed before them, its walls stretching up into the poisonous mist. Ancient erosion had carved the rock into a maze of passages and dead ends, perfect for cornering prey. Thermal signatures are confused in there, Thax said, adjusting his equipment. The rock contains heavy metals that interfere with our scanners. We go in old style, tracking by sight and scent. They entered the canyon, confidence radiating from every movement. The Vorthak had hunted in worse conditions. Their species had claimed victory over the armored Goliaths of Sigma Draconis, the phase-shifting wraiths of the Void Nebula, and even the legendary Silicon Devourers. One small human woman would be child's play. Deeper they went, following subtle signs, a scuff mark here, a broken fragment of rock there. The canyon narrowed, shadows growing longer. Zek's instincts, honed by generations of predator genetics, began sending warning signals. Something felt wrong. The trail was too obvious, too easy to follow. "Commander," he started to say, but Thax silenced him with a gesture. "I see her," Krell whispered, pointing to a figure huddled behind a boulder 50 meters ahead. "She's trapped herself. Pathetic." They spread out, moving to surround their prey. This was the part they lived for, the moment when the hunted realized there was no escape. They would savor her terror, perhaps play with her a bit before the killing blow. It was tradition. Thax stepped out from cover, plasma rifle aimed at the figure. "Human Sarah Chun," he announced in accented Earth standard. "By the laws of the Great Hunt, you have been selected as prey. Your struggle has been admirable, but it ends now. Stand and Face your death with what dignity your species can muster. The figure didn't move. Krell approached from the left flank, claws extended. Perhaps she's already dead from fear, he joked. Humans are known for their weak hearts. He reached for the huddled form and pulled away what looked like an environmental suit. Empty. It was a decoy, cleverly crafted from local materials and worn equipment. In that instant, Zek's instincts screamed danger. He spun around, weapon raising, just as the real trap was sprung. The explosion wasn't from any weapon the Vorthack recognized. Sarah Chun had somehow weaponized the canyon's natural gas vents, turning volatile compounds into improvised charges. The blast didn't kill, it wasn't meant to. Instead, it brought down carefully weakened sections of the canyon walls. Tons of rock crashed down, separating the three hunters. Thax found himself cut off from his team, surrounded by walls of fresh debris. Krell was trapped in a narrow crevice, his larger bulk working against him. Zek managed to dodge the worst of it, but found himself in a natural pit with smooth walls his claws couldn't grip. Then, she appeared. Sarah Chun stood atop the canyon wall, silhouetted against the toxic sky. She wasn't cowering or running. She was studying them with the cold calculation of a fellow predator. The environmental suit she wore was patched together from various sources, some clearly scavenged from previous visitors to this world who hadn't been as fortunate. Or perhaps, Zek realized with growing dread, as skilled. She didn't speak. She simply watched as they struggled to free themselves, taking notes on a battered datapad. Her movements were efficient, economical. The months on this hostile world had burned away any excess, leaving only what was necessary for survival. But there was something else, something in her eyes that made Zek's hunting instincts reverse themselves for the first time in his life. She wasn't looking at them like prey looked at predators. She was looking at them like a scientist studying specimens, like a hunter evaluating targets. Sarah Chun turned and vanished into the growing darkness, leaving the galaxy's greatest predators trapped like cubs in their first training exercise. The hunt was far from over, but a terrible thought crept into Zek's mind as he struggled against the smooth stone walls. What if they had never been the hunters at all? The night sounds of Kepler 442b began, screams and roars of nocturnal killers emerging from their dens. And somewhere in that alien darkness, a human woman moved with purpose, no longer running but planning. The Vorthack had come to hunt her, confident in their superiority. They were about to learn why humanity had survived in a galaxy full of predators, not through strength or natural weapons, but through the most dangerous evolution of all, the ability to turn any situation to their advantage. The trap in the canyon had been just the beginning. Sarah Chun had spent 3 years learning this planet's every secret, turning its deadliest features into her arsenal. The Vorthack thought they were hunting a scared, lost human. Instead, they had walked into the territory of something far more dangerous, a human who had stopped being prey and chosen to become something else entirely. The real hunt was about to begin, and this time, the Vorthack would learn what it felt like to be on the other side of the equation. In his pit, Zek heard something that chilled his green blood, the sound of native predators approaching, drawn by the commotion. But they weren't moving randomly. They were being herded, directed. Somehow, the human had turned the planet's killers into her unwitting allies. The young Vorthack warrior began to understand the truth. Humans didn't conquer through strength. They conquered through adaptation, intelligence, and the terrifying ability to turn any environment into a weapon. And right now, 3 of the galaxy's greatest hunters had walked willingly into a trap designed by a species that had turned survival itself into an art form. The night was long on Kepler 442b, and for the first time in their species' history, the Vorthack knew fear. The first scream came just after midnight. Krell's voice, usually so confident and mocking, now carried notes of panic that echoed off the canyon walls. Trapped in his narrow crevice, the massive hunter had become a sitting target for the swarm of blood wasps Sarah Chun had carefully directed his way. Each insect was no bigger than a human thumb, but Their venom caused excruciating pain without killing, evolution's way of ensuring their victims remain alive and screaming to attract more prey. Zek tried to climb out of his pit again, claws scraping uselessly against walls that had been deliberately coated with a slippery fungal extract. Every attempt sent him sliding back down. Above him, shapes moved in the darkness. The glowing eyes of scavenger pack that had learned to follow Sarah Chun because she always led them to food. Krell, report. Commander Thax's voice boomed through their communication system, professional calm barely masking his concern. The commander had managed to blast through some of the rockfall with his plasma rifle, but the weapon's power cells were draining fast. He'd already used 60% of his ammunition just trying to escape. The insects, there are thousands. Krell's transmission cut into static. The blood wasps were attracted to electrical signals, another fact Sarah had discovered through careful observation. In a natural blind overlooking the canyon, Sarah Chun sat cross-legged, watching through night vision equipment she'd salvaged from an unfortunate bounty hunter who'd made the mistake of underestimating her 2 years ago. She made another note on her datapad, documenting the Vorthack's response to stress. Their camouflage ability faltered when panicked, flickering between colors like a broken display. Interesting. She'd spent months preparing for this possibility. The galaxy was full of hunters who saw humans as easy targets, soft creatures who relied on technology rather than natural weapons. They always made the same mistakes, always underestimated the human capacity for turning disadvantage into opportunity. Sarah stood and moved to her next position, silent despite the heavy gravity. 3 years of constant survival had transformed her body and mind. Where once she'd relied on her ship's systems and standard equipment, now she could read the wind patterns that preceded the planet's deadly dust storms, identify edible plants that grew in contaminated soil, and, most importantly, understand the behavioral patterns of both predator and prey. The second phase of her plan required precise timing. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small device cobbled together from crashed ship parts and local crystalline formations. The crystals were unique to Kepler 442b, naturally producing ultrasonic frequencies that disrupted most electronic systems. She'd spent 6 months figuring out how to tune them to specific wavelengths. Activating the device, she counted slowly to 10. Right on schedule, the Vorthack's equipment began malfunctioning. Their advanced scanners showed ghost readings, their communications filled with static, and most critically, their weapons targeting systems went haywire. Thax roared in frustration as his plasma rifle's display flickered and died. The weapon could still fire, but without its computerized aiming assistance, accuracy dropped significantly. He was forced to rely on instinct alone, something the Vorthack hadn't needed to do in centuries of technological superiority. "Fall back to the ship," he commanded, abandoning his trapped teammates temporarily. Protocol dictated preserving command structure above all else. He could return with heavier equipment once he reached their vessel. But Sarah had anticipated this too. As Thax emerged from the canyon, he found his path blocked by a massive stone avalanche that definitely hadn't been there before. Fresh tool marks showed where someone had carefully weakened the cliff face above, waiting for the perfect moment to trigger its collapse. The commander's eyes narrowed as he scanned the shadows. For the first time, he truly looked at his surroundings not as a hunter seeking prey, but as a potential victim checking for threats. The realization was deeply unsettling to a creature who'd never known what it meant to be hunted. Movement caught his eye, a figure darting between rock formations with practiced ease. He fired his plasma rifle, the bright blue bolt searing through the air. It struck rock, leaving a molten crater, but no blood. More movement to his left. He spun and fired again. Another miss. Sarah Chun was implementing tactics she'd learned from studying the planet's apex predator, a creature the locals had dubbed the Shadow Stalker. Never give your enemy a stationary target. Never move in predictable patterns. Always ensure they waste resources before engaging directly. Meanwhile, Krell had managed to squeeze partially out of his crevice, his adaptive skin torn, and bleeding from dozens of wasp stings. The venom wouldn't kill him. Vorthack physiology was too robust for that, but the pain was excruciating. Worse, the wounds would leave a scent trail that every predator within kilometers could follow. He stumbled through the darkness, trying to reunite with his commander. His thermal vision, usually perfect for tracking warm-blooded prey, was useless here. Sarah had learned to use the planet's natural hot springs and volcanic vents to mask her heat signature, moving through zones where the ambient temperature matched human body heat. A sound behind him made Krell spin around. Nothing but shadows and the rustle of alien vegetation. He turned back and found a message written in the dirt, spelled out in perfect Vorthack script. You came here to hunt. Welcome to the food chain. The psychological impact was immediate. Krell had hunted on 100 worlds, taken trophies from species across the galaxy. The idea that he could become prey, that he was being toyed with by what his people considered inferior species, struck at the very core of his identity. In his pit, Zek had stopped trying to climb. Instead, he sat still, observing, thinking. Unlike his older companions, he hadn't yet been fully indoctrinated into Vorthack superiority. He could see what they couldn't or wouldn't. The human wasn't just surviving. She was conducting a systematic campaign, using their own hunting protocols against them. The separation of the group, classic tactic to prevent coordinated response. The non-lethal nature of the attacks, keeping them alive but wounded to slow progress and create fear. The psychological warfare, messages, and demonstrations designed to break their confidence. It was brilliant in its simplicity. A rope dropped into his pit, not a rescue. The rope was too thin to hold a Vorthack's weight. Attached was a water container and a piece of local fruit. A message was clear. She could reach him whenever she wanted, could have poisoned him already if that was her goal. She was choosing to keep him alive. Zek stared at the offering for a long moment, then made a decision that would have branded him a heretic among his people. He called out in careful Earth standard, I yield. I acknowledge your superiority as a hunter. Silence greeted his words. Then, from somewhere above, a voice responded, not gloating or cruel, but matter of fact. Your acknowledgement is irrelevant. You came to my territory uninvited, threatened my life for sport. Now you face the consequences. The rope withdrew. Zek was left to contemplate a truth his species had forgotten in their millennia of dominance. There was always a bigger predator. Sometimes it just came in an unexpected form. Dawn on Kepler, 442b, brought new horrors. The night predators retreated, but day hunters emerged. Fax had spent the night backed against a cliff face, burning through most of his remaining ammunition to keep the circling pack animals at bay. His usually pristine armor was scored with claw marks. His breathing labored in the thin atmosphere. Krell had fared worse. The wasp venom had begun affecting his nervous system, causing tremors that made accurate shooting impossible. He discarded his heavy plasma rifle, now relying on blade weapons that required him to get dangerously close to any threat. Both hunters had received emergency signals from their ship. The automated systems reported multiple hull breaches, critical system failures, and contamination of the water recycling system. Someone had spent hours carefully sabotaging their only means of escape, showing an intimate knowledge of Vorthack technology that should have been impossible for a human to possess. Unless, Thax realized with growing horror, she'd had other Vorthack visitors during her time here. Hunters who'd simply disappeared, their fate attributed to the planet's dangers rather than human ingenuity. The sun climbed higher, and with it came the temperature spike that made midday lethal for most species. The Vorthack could survive it, but their energy reserves would be severely depleted. Sarah Chun, they noticed, moved only in the shadows, conserving her strength while forcing them to exhaust theirs. By the time the third night fell, the hunters had become the hunted in every sense. Krell could barely walk, supported by his commander, who wasn't in much better condition. Their weapons were nearly depleted, their equipment malfunctioning, their bodies pushed to limits they'd never experienced. They found temporary shelter in a shallow cave, only to discover it was another trap. The cave had only one entrance, and Sarah had positioned herself on the high ground overlooking it. Not to attack, simply to ensure they knew she was there. That they couldn't rest, couldn't recover, couldn't plan without knowing death could come at any moment. In his separate prison, Zek observed the native creatures that came to investigate him. They showed no fear, suggesting they'd grown accustomed to seeing trapped Vorthak. How many others had come here? How many had fallen to this human who'd turned an entire planet into her weapon? He thought about the Great Hunt, the tradition that sent Vorthak across the galaxy to prove their superiority over lesser species. For the first time, he wondered if they'd been proving the wrong thing entirely. Perhaps true superiority didn't come from physical strength or advanced technology, but from the ability to adapt, survive, and turn any situation to your advantage. Humans possessed something the Vorthak had lost in their evolutionary success, the knowledge that they were vulnerable. And from that vulnerability came creativity, determination, and the kind of dangerous intelligence that could turn a crashed pilot into the galaxy's most lethal hunter. The night sounds began again, but now they carried a different meaning. Each roar and scream wasn't just random noise. It was part of a pattern, a language Sarah-chan had learned to speak. She wasn't just surviving on Kepler 442b. She had become part of its ecosystem, a new apex predator in the food chain. And the Vorthak, for all their strength and technology, were simply the latest prey to enter her domain. The fourth day brought revelations that shattered everything the Vorthak believed about themselves and their place in the galactic hierarchy. Thax and Krell, exhausted and demoralized, made a desperate push toward their ship's last known coordinates. What they found there changed everything. The clearing where they'd landed was now a graveyard. Not just their ship, though it sat there, methodically dismantled with surgical precision, but the remains of dozens of other vessels. Some were recent, others decades old, all belonging to various species known for their hunting prowess. Trophies of a different kind decorated the area, weapons, armor, and equipment arranged in careful displays. Among them, Thax recognized the distinctive plasma lance of a Krillian Deathstalker, beings considered even more dangerous than the Vorthak. The weapon was clean, well-maintained, and positioned next to what could only be the Krillian skull crown. They hadn't been killed by the planet's dangers. They had been hunted. Sarah-chan emerged from the shadows of a demolished Saurian battlecraft, no longer hiding her presence. 3 years of survival had transformed her from a pilot into something else entirely. Her movements carried the fluid grace of someone who'd learned from every predator on this world, adopted their strengths while maintaining the calculating intelligence that made humans unique. 57, she said calmly, her voice carrying across the clearing. That's how many hunting parties have come to this world since I crashed here. All of them following the same pattern. Track the distress beacon. Find the helpless human female. Enjoy the sport of the hunt. She gestured to the graveyard of ships. None of them expected the prey to have learned their tactics, studied their weaknesses, turned their arrogance into a weapon. Krell snarled, attempting to charge despite his injuries. 3 years ago, such a direct assault might have worked. But Sarah had long since learned to read body language across species. She sidestepped at the precise moment, using his momentum against him. A small device in her hand, cobbled together from various alien technologies, sent an electrical pulse through his nervous system. The massive hunter collapsed, paralyzed but conscious. The Vorthak nervous system, she continued conversationally, has a unique vulnerability to certain electrical frequencies. I learned that from your compatriot who visited 8 months ago. He was quite informative during our discussions. Thax stood frozen, not from fear, but from a complete recalibration of his worldview. This human hadn't just survived, she had evolved. Each hunting party had been a learning experience, each species providing new knowledge, new techniques, new technologies to reverse engineer. You want to know the difference between us? Sarah asked, circling them with predatory patience. You evolved to hunt. It's in your DNA, your instincts, your very identity. But humans? We evolved to adapt. When we were prey, we learned to make tools. When we faced predators, we learned their patterns. When we reached the stars and found beings like you, we learned something else. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. We learned that the greatest hunters in the galaxy all share the same weakness. They can't imagine being anything else. You see prey and predator as fixed roles, predetermined by evolution. But humans see them as situations, temporary states that can be changed with the right knowledge and preparation. Zek, still trapped in his pit, listened through the damaged communication system. Every word confirmed what he'd begun to suspect. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to learn, adapt, and transform weakness into strength. Sarah activated a holographic display salvaged from one of the wrecked ships. It showed detailed biological scans, behavioral analyses, and tactical assessments of dozens of species. Every hunter who came here contributed to my database. Vorthack camouflage operates on these wavelengths. Saurian armor has weak points here and here. Krillian hunting songs actually telegraph their attack patterns if you understand the rhythm. The display shifted to show something else: star charts, communication frequencies, and what looked like a comprehensive map of hunting routes used by various predator species across the galaxy. Did you think I was just surviving here? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've been preparing, learning, building. This planet isn't my prison. It's my laboratory. And every hunting party that arrives gives me more data, more equipment, more understanding of how the galaxy's apex predators think. She walked to a makeshift console built from components of various ships. I've been monitoring galactic communications for 2 years now. I know about your great hunt tradition, your proving grounds, your entire culture built around the belief that might makes right. But I also know something else. The console lit up, showing dozens of distress signals from across nearby systems. I'm not the only human who's learned these lessons. We're scattered across the galaxy, crash survivors, colonists cut off from support, prisoners who escaped. And we're all learning the same thing, that every strength can become a weakness, every predator can become prey, every hunter can be hunted. Fax finally found his voice. You're one human on one planet. You think this changes anything? Sarah smiled, and for the first time, the Vorthack commander truly understood what it meant to be looked at like prey. One human who's defeated 57 hunting parties. One human who's turned your own traditions against you. One human who now has enough salvage technology and accumulated knowledge to do something your species never imagined possible. She pressed a sequence of controls. Around the clearing, hidden weapons systems powered up, a mixture of technologies from various species, modified and integrated in ways their creators never intended. I'm going hunting. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Krell, still paralyzed on the ground, managed to speak. You can't. Humans aren't hunters. Your prey species always have been. Were, Sarah corrected. We were prey. But that's the beautiful thing about humans. We choose what we become. And after 3 years of being hunted for sport, I've chosen to become something your species has no frame of reference for. She looked directly at Zek's hiding spot, knowing exactly where the youngest Vorthack was trapped. Your companion understands. He's been watching, learning, adapting, just like a human would. That's why I've kept him separate. He has potential the rest of you lack. Returning her attention to Thax, she pulled up another display. This one showed the Vorthack homeworld, their colonies, their hunting preserves, all mapped in disturbing detail. Every species that hunts for sport follows patterns. Territory, hierarchy, tradition. You're predictable in ways you can't even see because you've never had to be anything else. But I've had 3 years to study those patterns to understand the psychology of beings who see themselves as apex predators. She turned off the displays and faced them directly. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to your people. Yes, I'm letting you go. You're going to tell them about the human on Kepler, 442b, who hunt hunters. Some will believe you, others won't. The skeptics will come to prove you wrong. And Each one will add to my knowledge, my arsenal, my understanding. Thax struggled to process this. You're using us as bait. For your own species? No, Sarah said quietly. I'm using you as a message. The age of humans being easy prey is over. We've learned too much, adapted too far, become too dangerous. Every hunter who comes here thinking otherwise proves that point. She moved to the paralyzed Krell, injecting him with something that slowly restored his movement. The paralytic will wear off in an hour. Your ship's communication array still works. I made sure of that. Send your distress signal, call for rescue. Tell them what happened here. They'll come in force, Thax warned. Entire hunting packs. Warships. I'm counting on it, Sarah replied. Because for every advanced ship that arrives, I gain new technology. For every hunter who falls, I learn new weaknesses. Your species spent millions of years evolving into perfect predators. Humans have learned to compress that evolution into a single generation through pure will and necessity. She walked to one of the salvaged weapons, a hybrid of her own creation that combined elements from multiple species technologies. But here's the part that should truly terrify you. I'm not unique. Every human who survived being hunted has learned similar lessons. We're teaching each other, sharing knowledge across the stars. Your great hunt tradition has created its own antithesis. Humans who've been forged in the crucible of survival into something your evolution never prepared you for. Watching the Vorthack process this information, Sarah felt a cold satisfaction. 3 years ago, she'd been terrified, running for her life, certain she would die on this hostile world. The first hunting party had nearly succeeded, would have if not for pure luck and desperate improvisation. But each encounter had taught her something new. Each near-death experience had burned away another human limitation, another assumption about what was possible. The soft, weak pilot was gone. In her place stood something that transcended the simple predator-prey dynamic these aliens clung to. Go, she commanded. Return to your people. Tell them about the human who collects hunters like trophies. Tell them about the graveyard of ships, the knowledge I've accumulated, the weapons I've built. Some will stay away. Others will come, seeking glory. And each choice proves the same point, that humans have become something you never expected. She paused, then added with quiet intensity. We've become the monsters that monsters fear. Thax helped Krell to his feet. The second in command was shaking, whether from the paralytic's after effects or pure terror was unclear. They began moving toward their ship's communication array, no longer concerned with hunting or glory, focused only on survival. Wait, Sarah called out. They froze. Leave your weapons. All of them. The request, no, the command, went against every Vorthack instinct. A hunter's weapons were sacred, symbols of their status and skill. But, looking at the graveyard of ships, the displayed trophies of dozens of species who'd thought the same thing, they complied. As they worked to repair their communications, Sarah climbed to Zek's pit. The young hunter looked up at her with something that might have been respect or understanding. You see it, don't you? She asked. The paradigm shift. Your species defines themselves as hunters, but hunting is just a behavior. It can be learned, improved, perfected by any species with the will to do so. And humans have more will than you can possibly imagine. What are you? Zek asked in careful Earth standard. Sarah considered the question. I'm what happens when you push a species too far. When you hunt us for sport, you teach us to hunt for survival. When you see us as prey, you force us to become predators. When you think you're safe in your superiority, you create the very beings who will prove you wrong. She dropped a ladder into the pit, a real one this time, sturdy enough to hold his weight. You can choose, climb out, and join your commanders, return to a culture that will never understand what happened here. Or stay and learn what humans have learned, that adaptation is the ultimate evolution. Zek looked at the ladder for a long moment. In the distance, they could hear Thax successfully making contact with a Vorthack rescue vessel. The commander was struggling to explain their situation, his words met with disbelief and derision from the other end. The young hunter began to climb. When he reached the surface, he faced the human who'd systematically destroyed everything his species believed about their place in the universe. "I want to understand," he said simply. Sarah nodded. "The first lesson is this. There are no apex predators in the universe. There are only beings who haven't met their match yet. Your species forgot that truth. Humans can never afford to." As the sun set on another day on Kepler 442b, two figures stood among the graveyard of ships, a human who'd transformed from prey to predator, and an alien beginning to understand that evolution wasn't just about biology. It was about choice. And humans, pushed to the brink, had chosen to become something the galaxy had never seen before. The hunters who became the ultimate hunt. 6 months passed after the Vorthak rescue ship extracted Thax and Krell from Kepler 442b. The commander's report had sent shockwaves through the highest levels of the Great Hunt Council. Half the members dismissed it as delusional ravings from hunters who'd suffered psychological breakdown. The other half wanted to mobilize entire fleets to eliminate what they saw as an emerging threat. But Sarah Chun had anticipated this division perfectly. She knew that pride would prevent unified action, that different factions would respond in different ways. Some would stay away, fearful. Others would come in small groups, seeking to prove the story false. And a few would arrive in force, hoping to demonstrate Vorthak superiority once and for all. Each response played into her hands. On Kepler 442b, the transformation was remarkable. What had once been a desperate survival shelter carved in a rock had become a sophisticated command center. Sarah worked alongside Zek, who'd proven an eager student in the art of adaptive hunting. The young Vorthak's insider knowledge of hunter species psychology, combined with Sarah's human innovation, created strategies neither species would have developed alone. Another probe from the Saurian Collective, Zek announced, monitoring the advanced scanning array they built from salvage parts. Third one this week. They're mapping the planet's defenses. Sarah studied the data. Let them. They're seeing what I want them to see: conventional weapon placements, predictable defensive patterns. They won't detect the bioweapons I've cultivated in the eastern swamps or the EMP mines in the canyon systems. She'd learned from every encounter that the greatest weapon against overconfident hunters was their own expectations. They came expecting certain types of resistance, planned for conventional tactics. None of them were prepared for a human who'd spent years turning an entire planet into a living weapon system. The first major test came when a Krillian war pack arrived, 6 of their best hunters in a heavily armed assault craft. They'd studied the reports, dismissed the human threat as exaggerated, and come to claim what they saw as easy glory. Sarah watched their approach through hidden sensors, noting their formation, their equipment, their behavioral patterns. Everything was documented, analyzed, added to her ever-growing database on predator species psychology. They're following standard Krillian assault protocol, Zek observed. Overwhelming force applied to a single point. They expect you to either flee or mount a conventional defense. Then we give them neither, Sarah replied, activating a series of commands. The Krillians landed hard and fast, their weapons already hot. They found the graveyard of ships, saw the trophies, and laughed. To them, it looked like desperate posturing from a frightened prey animal trying to appear dangerous. Their laughter died when the ground beneath them liquefied. Sarah had discovered a peculiar property of certain mineral deposits on Kepler 442b. When exposed to specific sonic frequencies, they underwent temporary phase transition. Combined with the planet's high gravity, it created perfect trap zones. The Krillians' heavy armor became their doom as they sank into what moments before had been solid rock. As they struggled, automated drones, cobbled together from various technologies, emerged from hidden positions, not to attack, but to observe, recording every moment of panic, every desperate attempt to escape. The footage would be invaluable for understanding Krillian stress responses. 2 of the hunters managed to activate their emergency jetpacks, rocketing free of the liquefied ground. They lasted exactly 47 seconds before interceptor missiles, modified from their own ship's armory, brought them down. The remaining 4 faced a different fate. As the ground solidified around them, trapping them up to their chest plates, Sarah emerged with Zek at her side. The sight of a Vorthack working alongside a human broke something fundamental in the Krillian's worldview. Your species prides itself on pack coordination, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the toxic air. But you've never faced a pack that includes both human adaptability and Vorthack hunting instincts. Zek, demonstrate. The young Vorthack moved with his species' natural predatory grace, but his tactics were pure human-taught psychological warfare. He disabled their weapons with precise strikes, not to their mechanisms, but to the neural interfaces that connected Krillian minds to their technology. Within minutes, the galaxy's feared pack hunters were reduced to helpless spectators. Sarah crouched near their leader, studying the fear in its 6 eyes. Your mistake was the same as every hunter before you. You saw a human and thought prey. You never considered that prey is just a role, not an identity. And roles can be reversed. She stood, gesturing to the drones. Your ship's AI has been recording everything, broadcasting it back to your homeworld on encrypted channel you thought I couldn't crack. But did you know that Krillian encryption is based on Vorthack mathematics? And I have a Vorthack teacher now. The leader's eyes widened further as it realized the implications. Every moment of their defeat, their helplessness, their fear, was being transmitted live to their people. You have 2 choices, Sarah continued. Die here, adding to my collection, or return home carrying a message that humanity is no longer on the menu. That every hunter who comes for us becomes a lesson in why that's a fatal mistake. She nodded to Zek, who began extracting them from their rock prison with tools designed for precisely this purpose. As they worked, Sarah noticed something interesting. The youngest Krillian was watching her with the same expression Zek had worn months ago. Recognition, understanding, perhaps even respect. You, she addressed the young hunter. What's your name? Vex Ka, it replied in accented Earth standard. Youngest of the Blood Moon Pack. You see it, don't you? The shift. The change in the order of things. Vex Ka's mandibles clicked nervously. My pack leader says you're an anomaly. That humanity will fall once we understand your tricks. Sarah smiled coldly. Your pack leader is half right. I'm an anomaly for now. But every human who survives being hunted becomes like me. We're spreading the knowledge, teaching each other, evolving at a pace your biological evolution can't match. In 10 years, there won't be one human like me. There will be thousands. In 20 years, millions. She pulled up a star chart on her portable display. New markers had appeared over the past months. Other worlds where humans had turned the tables on their hunters. The network was growing. We're not conquering through force, she explained. We're conquering through forced evolution. Every time you hunt us, you make us stronger. Every time you corner us, we become more dangerous. It's not a war, it's natural selection in action. And you're selecting for humans who can out-hunt the hunters. The Krillians were freed, their weapons confiscated, their ship's offensive systems disabled. As they prepared to leave, Sarah made one final point. Tell your people that the human on Kepler 442b isn't hiding anymore. I'm here, waiting, learning from everyone who comes. Each hunter who arrives thinking they're the predator leaves understanding they were always the prey. The only choice is whether they leave alive to spread that knowledge. The war pack departed, thoroughly demoralized. Their live broadcast had shown everything to their homeworld. The defeat, the helplessness, the reversal of roles they'd thought immutable. But the real victory came 3 days later when Vex Ka returned alone. Teach me, the young Krillian said simply. My people are doomed to extinction if they can't adapt. You've shown that adaptation is possible. Sarah exchanged glances with Zek. The Vorthack nodded. He'd learned to read human expressions and saw her unspoken question. The coalition grows, Zek said. Human innovation, Vorthack hunting instinct, and now Krillian pack coordination. We become stronger with each species that joins us. Sarah agreed. This had always been the ultimate goal, not to defeat the galaxy's hunters, but to transform them, to show them that the predator-prey dynamic was obsolete, that survival in the universe required something more sophisticated than strength or natural weapons. Over the following weeks, more ships arrived. Some came in force, others cautiously. A few, like Vexka, came seeking knowledge rather than trophies. The graveyard of ships grew, but so did the small community of beings learning a new way. Sarah taught them human adaptability, how to see every disadvantage as a potential tool, every environment as a weapon, every enemy's strength as an exploitable weakness. Zek shared Vorthack hunting wisdom filtered through human innovation. Vexka contributed Krillian pack tactics modified for multi-species cooperation. Together, they developed something unprecedented in galactic history, a hunting methodology that transcended species boundaries, combining the best of biological evolution with conscious adaptation. Word spread through unofficial channels. Whispers in hunting lodges spoke of the human who collected predators like trophies, but also of the coalition forming on Kepler 442b. Young hunters from various species began questioning their traditions, wondering if there was more to existence than the simple predator-prey cycle. The establishment fought back, of course. The Great Hunt Council declared Sarah Chun a priority target, offering rewards that would make any hunter wealthy for life. But they failed to understand that they were fighting an idea, not just an individual. Every hunting party that came for the bounty became either another trophy or another convert. The smart ones realized that Sarah wasn't their enemy. She was evolution personified, offering them a choice between adaptation and extinction. One night, as 3 moons rose over the toxic landscape of Kepler 442b, Sarah stood with her unlikely alliance. A human, a Vorthack, a Krillian, and half a dozen other species who'd chosen evolution over tradition. They still don't understand, Vexka observed, watching sensor readings of another approaching hunt ship. They think this is about winning or losing, predator versus prey. Let them, Sarah replied. Everyone who comes here thinking in those terms leaves with their worldview shattered. We're not trying to win a war. We're catalyzing an evolution. Zek activated the defensive systems they'd built together, not weapons of destruction, but tools of education. Each encounter was designed to teach a lesson, to force hunters to confront the limitations of their thinking. Humanity's greatest strength, Sarah continued, was never our technology or our numbers. It was our ability to make others stronger by forcing them to adapt. We're not replacing the galaxy's predators. We're upgrading them. The approaching ship entered the planet's atmosphere, its crew confident in their superiority. They had no idea they were about to become part of humanity's greatest triumph, the transformation of the galaxy's hunters into something far more dangerous and far more sophisticated. The age of simple predators and prey was ending. The age of conscious evolution had begun, and at its heart was a human who'd refused to accept her assigned role in the food chain, choosing instead to rewrite the rules entirely. The hunt continued, but now it had a different purpose. Not for sport or glory, but for transformation. Each hunter who came to Kepler 442b faced a choice: evolve or become extinct. Most chose evolution, and with each choice, humanity's ultimate victory became more certain. Not through conquest, but through the most dangerous weapon any species could wield, the ability to make others see the universe through human eyes. The transformation began slowly, like ripples on a cosmic pond, but within 2 years of Sarah Chen's first reversed hunt, the entire galactic paradigm had shifted. The Great Hunt Council convened an emergency session on the Vorthack homeworld, their ancient chambers filled with representatives from every major predator species in known space. Commander Thax stood before them, no longer the proud hunter who departed for Kepler 442b 3 years ago. His testimony had weight because of what he'd become, neither broken nor defeated, but evolved. The human didn't just defeat us, he stated, his voice carrying hard-won wisdom. She showed us that we were defeating ourselves. Every tradition we clung to, every assumption about our superiority, was a weakness she exploited. But more than that, she offered us a choice. The council erupted in debate. Hardliners demanded massive military action, the complete sterilization of Kepler 442b. Others, mostly younger members, argued for a different approach. The divide was generational, philosophical, and growing wider every day. On Kepler 442b, Sarah Chun watched the proceedings through a hacked communication feed. Her command center had evolved from a survival shelter into something resembling the bridge of a ship. If ships were designed by someone who'd learned engineering from a dozen different species and improved on them all. They're fracturing, Zek observed, studying the behavioral patterns of the council members. The old guard can't accept change. The younger generation sees the writing on the wall. Good, Sarah replied. Revolution always comes from within. We just provided the catalyst. Her alliance had grown to include members from 17 different species. Former hunters who'd come seeking human prey and left with human perspective. Each brought their own biological advantages, their own tactical knowledge, their own piece of the puzzle. Vexka coordinated their early warning systems, the Krillian pack instincts perfect for managing multiple data streams. A Saurian engineer named Therm had revolutionized their defensive weapons, combining reptilian patience with human innovation. Even a member of the Silicon Devourers, beings thought incapable of change, had joined after witnessing Sarah turn their crystalline biology from a hunting advantage into a liability. But the most significant convert was yet to come. The ship that entered Kepler 442b's orbit wasn't a hunting vessel. It was a diplomatic courier bearing the colors of the Great Hunt Council itself. From it descended a single figure, Elder Kor, the oldest and most respected member of the Vorthak leadership. Sarah met him in the graveyard of ships, the symbolic weight of the location lost on neither of them. Kor moved slowly, his great age showing in every step, but his eyes remained sharp with the intelligence that had made him legendary among his people. So, he said, studying the displays of defeated hunters, you're the human who broke our traditions. I'm the human who showed they were already broken, Sarah corrected. Your traditions worked when the galaxy was simpler, when species kept to their own territories, when technology moved slowly. But the universe changed and you didn't change with it. Kor examined a piece of hybrid technology, recognizing elements from multiple species integrated in ways that should have been impossible. My grandson is among your converts. Zek chose to evolve, just as you're choosing by being here. The elder's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. You assume I'm here to join you? No, Sarah said. You're here because you've already joined us. You just need to admit it to yourself. The fact that the council sent you, their most revered elder, means they're more afraid than they'll ever acknowledge. They sent you to evaluate the threat, but also to find a solution that doesn't end with the extinction of everything they built. She gestured to her alliance members, who had emerged from various positions around the clearing. Look at them. Former enemies working together, sharing knowledge, growing stronger through cooperation rather than competition. This is the future, whether the council accepts it or not. Kor studied each member carefully, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. Show me. What followed was a demonstration that would be remembered in galactic history as the moment everything changed. Sarah didn't show military might or advanced weapons. Instead, she showed the power of synthesis. Zek and Vexka worked together to track and trap one of Kepler 442b's most dangerous predators, a phase-shifting horror that had killed dozens of hunters over the years. But they didn't kill it. Using techniques Sarah had developed, they communicated with it, established boundaries, turned it from threat to ally. Therm demonstrated construction techniques that combined Saurian strength with human engineering and Krillian cooperative building methods. In hours, they assembled structures that would have taken any single species weeks to complete. The Silicon Devourer, through a translation matrix Sarah had developed, shared knowledge of quantum crystalline structures that revolutionized their understanding of energy manipulation. But the most powerful demonstration was Sarah herself. She sparred with each alliance member, using their own techniques against them, but also showing how human adaptability could enhance their natural abilities. She wasn't stronger or faster, but she was infinitely more versatile. "This is what we offer," she said to Core after the demonstrations. "Not the destruction of predator species, but their evolution. Not the end of hunting, but its transformation into something greater. We hunt ignorance, stagnation, the limitations of single-species thinking." The elder was silent for a long time, processing what he'd seen. Then he did something that shocked even Sarah. He knelt, not in submission, but in recognition. "The Great Hunt was created to prevent our species from stagnating," he said, "to ensure we remained sharp, focused, evolving. But we corrupted it into mere sport, forgot its true purpose. You've reminded us." He stood, decision made. "I will return to the council with a proposal. Not for war or surrender, but for transformation. The Great Hunt will continue, but its nature will change. Instead of hunting other species for sport, we will hunt our own limitations. Instead of trophies of the dead, we will collect alliances with the living." Sarah felt a moment of triumph, but kept it from her face. "And humanity will be recognized as what you've already become, the catalyst for the galaxy's next evolutionary leap. Not because you're superior, but because you force everyone around you to become more than they were." The meeting ended with an exchange of data, Sarah providing her accumulated knowledge of adaptive tactics, Core sharing the deep history and psychology of the predator species. Both understood they were trading weapons that could destroy or create, depending on how they were used. As the elder's ship departed, Zek approached Sarah. "Do you think the council will accept his proposal?" "Some will, some won't," she replied. "But that's not the point. The idea is out there now, spreading through their culture like a virus. Every young hunter who questions the old ways, every veteran who's tired of meaningless kills, every species that realizes cooperation yields better results than competition, they're all part of the change." Over the following months, the shift accelerated. Some hunting parties still came to Kepler, 442b seeking traditional glory, but they were increasingly outnumbered by those seeking knowledge. The graveyard of ships became a university, each wreck a classroom where former predators learned to think like humans. The first mixed-species hunt was organized 8 months later. Not a hunt for sapient beings, but for something far more challenging, a cooperative mission to capture and study one of the galaxy's last unsolved mysteries, an energy being that had eluded researchers for centuries. The team consisted of humans who'd learned predator tactics, Vorthak who'd mastered human adaptability, Krillians who'd incorporated saurian patience, and a dozen other combinations that would have been unthinkable years before. They succeeded where thousands of traditional efforts